Some indeed riveting words coming in there. So thank you very much, Mr. Misra, for sharing your valuable thoughts with all of us. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, the Indian aerospace and defense manufacturing sector has seen exponential growth in the last few years. Today, the sector is on the verge of transformation powered by important government initiatives such as Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, Self-Reliant India campaign. According to government estimates, the aerospace and defense industry in India is likely to reach a market size of 70 billion US dollars by 2030. To give a holistic view of the industry, we now move forward towards our first panel discussion for the day on a very pertinent topic. How is the aerospace sector changing the business model to adapt to the post-COVID business environment? Now, that's a very important question, which is why we have lined up some eminent speakers to share their answers with all of you. So for this panel discussion, firstly, I'm going to be inviting none other than Wing Commander Shashikant Kopikar, Vayu Sena Medal, retired Indian Air Force, to please moderate this power-packed panel. And may I also invite our panelists. We have with us Mr. R. Madhavan, Chairman and Managing Director, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, Mr. Kaustab Shukla, Advisor and former COO, Godrej and Boyce, and Mr. Eric Godhard, Senior Vice President, Global Head of Aerospace, Kone Nagar. So with that, let's deep dive into this very important panel discussion.
May I start by welcoming all of you for this opening session of Economic Times Aerospace and Defense Summit 2021.
Good morning to you.
And in the discussions today, we have 4 distinguished guests. I'll start with Mr. Madhavan, Chairman HAL. Next, Mr. Saurabh Shukla, Advisor and Chief Operating Officer, Godrej and Boyce. Mr. Meligiri of Equus Aerospace. And last but not the least, Mr. Eric Gedhardt of Kone Nagar, a global player in the aerospace logistics.
Good afternoon.
Okay, gentlemen, actually the defense production space in India occupies a vast canvas. But within the time available, what we'll try is to get through to some of the most essential points, which will give the viewers an insight into what it's like in the aerospace and defense in India. May I start with you, Mr. Madhavan? So, my first question to you. The last 2 or 3 years have been good for you. You have bagged an order for 83 Tejas combat aircraft from Indian Air Force. You have successfully handled the high altitude trials of the light combat helicopter. You have had a successful trial run of the naval version of the Tejas. You have a new combat helicopter factory at Tumkur, and you have had a successful IPO. Against this background, what's the atmosphere like in your boardroom down to the shop floor?
To start with, there are lots of things happening in this sector, and we are quite excited about it. And that percolates down to not from the boardroom down to the last person in our organization. A lot of things is going to happen also. There is lots of platforms being developed, notwithstanding the fact that there is LCA coming up. Then there is LCA versions of it. There's Mark II, the TED-BF, that is your deck-based fighter aircraft, then the AMCA. So we have a visibility for the next 15 to 20 years in the fixed wing section. On top of that, we have a very strong line that is, of course, HAL's own for the rotary wings. We started with the Dhruv ALH, which has various versions. Now it is running in Mark 4. And then we have got the LUH, the light utility helicopter, where the numbers are good. And the light combat helicopter. And of course, one more which is in the drawing board, that is the IMRS, that is a 13-ton helicopter, which gives you a picture of HAL's involvement right from 3 tons to 13-ton helicopters. On top of that, there is new RUAVs and UAVs coming up. So there's a lot of things going on in this sector. So the same thing as far as the other players are concerned, including the vendor base that we have. For them, this is a good opportunity to invest and to go ahead in this sector. Of course, there are certain say entry barriers, which of course has to be seen, but there's a way out for that, because we have what is a vendor base of more than 2,000 vendors in the system, and we expect that they graduate from tier 3 to tier 2 and tier 1 suppliers to us, so that we end up as the designers and also the final integrators of the aircraft. And rest of the things we should expect that it comes from the ecosystem that is developed within the country. To add the Atmanirbhar Bharat program and Make in India, and of course the indigenization content increase, all these things add to the possibilities of a very robust manufacturing sector coming up in this aerospace sector.
At the shop floor level, it is said that you wanted to put in a second assembly line for Tejas. Has that been done?
Yes, we have already started, and the second assembly line is in place, and it will start the production activities when the 83 Mark 1A LCX comes in. That will be beginning from the first quarter of 2024. All the systems are in place. We are already getting into our purchase orders are being placed on the vendors, and material procurement is also being taken up along with the design of the Mark 1A. So we expect that somewhere around middle of next year, we'll have the first flight trials for the Mark 1A, so that we are in time for certification and delivery by 2024, March.
Thank you, Mr. Naudhar. May I turn to Mr. Kaustubh Shukla? Mr. Shukla, of course, the name Godrej is well known, and you have a product portfolio which is fairly diverse. You are supplying components to the Indian Space Research Organization, and you are also supplying components to the French engine maker Safran and to the UK engine maker Rolls-Royce. Could you give us an idea of the volumes that you are generating, either in terms of tonnage or whatever parameter you use, and your annual turnover?
Yeah, so some of the details here are confidential and of course not open for public consumption, but I can say that we have seen a lot of excitement in in aerospace sector, and while our association with ISRO goes back to about 30 years, for the past 15 years we can say that we have been serving the global majors in aviation, and almost 40% of our revenue comes from exports, and we sell to Americans and Europeans, British, French, makers. And our portfolio, as you rightly said, also is quite diverse. So, we handle multiple metallurgies. So whether it's aluminum, stainless steel, titanium, we have fair bit of capabilities there. We also have a good, rubber and composites, line of business where we make tanks for helicopters for European and even Japanese. So therefore, I think these have been, very, as we all know, and Mr. Madhavan also pointed out to that, these are long drawn programs. A lot of investment is needed, capability building, capacity building, qualifications, skilling, training, and, first article approval and so on and so forth. So we have been at this for maybe about 15 years back. And, we have acquired along the way more than 20 NatCap approval programs, and we are on the merit, listing. That suggests, really, cutting edge implementation of process process control. And whether it is approvals like AS 9000 and all that, those are of course needed. For aerospace programs, we also need individual customers' approvals for processes and people, machinery, and so on and so forth. So I think we have a lot under our belt, and all these capabilities will help us really grow. I would say in the last 2 years, we have been badly affected because of COVID, particularly because civil aviation demand really plummeted. But, we understand that there are special causes, for that. And going forward, as we recover from the COVID impact, whether civil aviation or for programs like what Mr. Madhavan just laid out, I think going forward, I can see, very good days for domestic aerospace manufacturing industry. And, we certainly, we have a good, order bank. We are currently also executing, rather ferociously. A lot of work is going on. The shop floor is humming with activity. And I think these good days will certainly stay for the next 10 years or so. So I think an oblique answer to that question is we are very happy with the current state of affairs, with the order books that we have, and we see growth going forward, both in numbers and outputs. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. My next question was for Mr. Meligiri, but we seem to have lost the connection to him. So I'll turn to Mr. Eric Gedard. Mr. Gedard, I'm sure you have checked up the Indian scenario at close quarters. What sort of opportunities do you see in the Indian aerospace sector?
So, thank you very much. First of all, I'm very honored to be in an audience as quote unquote outsider, but that makes me feel so warm in India because I've been a lot around in panels.
It's a global village, Mr. Govard. So there are no outsiders and insiders.
Sorry?
It's a global village, so there are no outsiders and insiders.
Thank you, and that's the way I feel, and I cannot wait to come back. And we will do our annual summit anyway, but I feel so warm with India always. So if you look at the opportunities, if I may, to divide it in two sectors, we have the aerospace sector itself, where you have the flying part of aerospace and the manufacturing part of aerospace. I'm so impressed by the agenda of the government as well, by looking at the flying part, how many airports, hundreds of airports to be employed in the upcoming decades, by the impressive integration and consolidation of the airline sector. And of course, if we look at a macro level, India becoming the number 3 in traveling passengers in the world in the 20 years to come, after the US and China. So that already says a lot about the flying sector. If you look about the manufacturing sector in aerospace itself, high quality. I mean, the alliances and the ventures of Tata, Lockheed Martin, etc., etc. So I've been always impressed since my Fokker days in the early 90s already with the competencies of HAL, etc. So I call that a little bit, if I may, the roots. And in the growing aerospace world, those roots will be crucial for success. The defense market has been strong and stayed strong during the pandemic. So India is a highly intellectual, knowledge, competent defense player in the global world, and together with that aerospace knowledge, that will only benefit in the long-term future. If I may, from a logistic point of view, add to the total, I think logistics in that respect is underestimated, because we didn't only have COVID, which brought the aerospace industry down, but we also have a highly disrupted world. And with all the plans of India, the manufacturing and flying sector, logistics, I always say, is not just another paperclip which you buy, but is a core element of manufacturing processes and airline support processes. So I think logistics in both commercial aerospace and defense should be repositioned on the agenda, not only in India, but also in India.
Thank you, Mr. Kerat. Mr. Madhavan, I've been given to understand that you have important engagements waiting for you. So I'll finish with my quota of questions for you first. To the answer, in an answer to my first question, you had brought up an important point about the support system given by the MSMEs, etc. In the coming days, what sort of expansion of support from and to MSMEs do you see for your various ongoing and future projects?
This I will answer in two parts. One, for the existing platforms, we already have outsourced most of our manufacturing activities to the MSMEs, to the extent of more than 30% of my man hours are outsourced now to the MSMEs. This continues to be there, and we want to increase it to somewhere around 50 to 55% in the coming years. Probably in the next 5 years, we will see a figure which is somewhere near 50%. So there's a lot of work in that is going to be outsourced to the MSMEs as far as the existing platforms are also concerned. Further, we want our suppliers and vendors to graduate from tier 3 vendors. Those are the ones which they produce parts and equipment to drawings that we supply. I want them to graduate from level 3 to level 2 and level 1, where they design their own systems and we get the systems as end units that I can directly put into the aircraft. For that, you should understand that the cost of an aircraft, if you take it, more than 50% are accessories. So the cost, there's a lot of business involved. If I say that there is $1 billion of aircraft to be produced, that means about $500 million goes into the accessories. So that is where the money is, and that is where our vendors or the ecosystem, manufacturing ecosystem should look into, that they should start developing their own end units and end products, which can go directly after certification directly into the aircraft. One more point on this is that if you are developing a system, this system should be integrated during the design phase. So in the future programs that we have, the biggest one being, of course, IMRH, which is having a market of probably more than 2 lakh crores. So that is where we want this, our vendors and our MSMEs to join in now itself when it is under design, so that their system gets type approved along with the aircraft. Because the cost of type approval, the type testings are quite huge. So once the system is accepted on the aircraft, it continues to be there for the lifelong of that aircraft. So that is where we want them to come in with their products now and join in. As I told you earlier, we have got a large base of manufacturers, and they are very capable now. The skill levels have improved over the years. Earlier, we didn't have that kind of skill levels, so that we used to do the final finishing operations in HL and asking them to do the roughing operations by them. So now we have vendors who can provide directly to my assembly lines parts which are completed. And as Mr. Shukla was telling, many of them are now getting NATCAP approved. We have started long time back in NatCap approval, but at that time we found that other than us and one or two heat treatment shops around here, nobody had this kind of an approval. So this becomes now a norm for approvals other than AS 9100 and others, which is a standard way of getting a quality system approval. The NatCap approvals are also very important for us. So now we have a large number of such units in MSMEs who have this kind of approval. So we feel that it is the right time for them to look at product development rather than going to by the build to print standards. So we feel that this is the right time and that is a way to enter the market. And at the same time, then they will have products which are exportable to other OEMs. So they should not look at products which are platform dependent. That is, this is meant for LCA or this is meant for LCH. We don't want it that way. It's a standard product that can go across platforms, not only for HL, but for other OEMs across the world. That is how we should develop the ecosystem in the country.
Thank you. That should be good news for many startups and many aspiring MSMEs who would like to get into the defense production chain. My next question pertains to implementation of the recent indications of a policy, and that pertains to involving the private sector along with the PSUs in the defense manufacturing, so that the goal of Atmanirbharta or self-reliance is achieved in the shortest possible time. My first part of the question is, would you like to be a participant in such a venture? And number two, if yes, then what would be your expectations from your private sector partner? Would it be in terms of funding? Would it be in terms of entrepreneurial skill? Or would it be in terms of just widening the defense production base?
See, onboarding the private sector into the defense is something that we have been looking forward to for a long time. It's not only the funding part of it. Funding is not an issue as far as we are concerned as of now, but the thing is, onboarding them also means that I have a wider base of vendors which I can look at, wider base of industries that can support me in my endeavor as a integrator of the platform. So there are so many things that we gain out of it. In fact, we also are looking at startups where we are partnering with startups where they bring in their own say intellectual property along with us, because there are many startups who have the idea, but they don't know how to get it onto a usable product and how to get it tested, how to make it into a usable product which can go onto an aircraft. So this is where we are supporting them. And in many cases where there's a gap in their design knowledge, we are filling in that gaps. And that's how we are trying to bring in some startups along with us. Of course, there are industry, private industry versus HAL partnerships. There are many of them. And we also have partnerships with major OEMs outside, like we have one partnership with Rolls-Royce, which is called its IMPL. We have got a partnership with Safran. We started off as when it was SNECMA. So that is a partnership that we have got. We have got partnership with the Israeli companies. So many of them are there with us. So the partnership route is, earlier we used to look at as if where the niche products are required, we used to go into a partnership with those companies which had the technology for that. Now we are looking at partnerships to broad base my production activities, the broad base my business activities, as well as for my sales and support. So there are very many areas that we can look at it. It's not limited to funding. We are open to funding fully, to funding a very small part of the project that we are having. So funding is not the issue, but technology and broad basing our procurements, that is where we are looking at it.
Before you go, Mr. Madhavan, please allow me to play the devil's advocate. You had mentioned ongoing talks with Rolls-Royce and Safran. Obviously, these talks are taking place because somewhere on our own, we are unable to develop a combat aircraft engine power plant. I know that we have been able, or rather you have been able to develop engines for the basic and advanced trainers. But somehow, in spite of the efforts at Kaveri, etc., and here I do not intend to mention just HAL, I also intend to take in other institutes which have been trying to develop combat aircraft power plants. In spite of decades of efforts at Kaveri development, we have not been successful. And like you yourself mentioned, you are having ongoing talks with Rolls-Royce and Safran. What do you think is the reason? Is it, once again, lack of budgetary support? Is it technical skills? Is it the refinements or precision component engineering? Or is it something else which I have not mentioned?
Yes, engine development was with GTRE, that is a arm of DRDO. Earlier we had an engine design bureau with us, but then because GTRE was given the task of developing a fighter aircraft engine, we withdrew from that. And we went into more land-based systems like the test beds for engines and other areas. GTRE did develop an engine called Kaveri, but we should understand that it wasn't a out-and-out success, but it did develop a lot of technologies for us through that route. But the final thrust requirements was not met by the GTRE engine. The reasons could be many. One thing that we could see is that engine development is a huge activity, and it's a it's not so simple as developing any other product. It is quite a complex system. So we should have gone in with as a national project rather than leaving it with one agency, and with involvement of all stakeholders, not only the users or the developers, but we have so many academic institutions who are working on it, and HL itself, who is in the manufacturing sector and have a lot of technologies with us for this. And we do have a design team also along with that. So we can do it, provided it is taken up as a national project. The government has now come up with a plan for developing an engine complex, which is a welcome. They have started it, and we welcome that initiative. And we will be very happy to be part of that initiative. And that is meant for developing an engine in the category of 110 kilonewtons for the fighter aircrafts. So this is now just taking wings. So it will take some time before we identify how we are going to go about doing that job. But in the meantime, of course, HL also has been putting efforts on its own for smaller engines. Like we have one running for a 1200 kilowatt engine meant for helicopters, which has reached 100% RPM, and the tests are all successful till date. And we also have one 25 kilonewton engine, which is in the same category as what we are using for Jaguar and Hawks, and basically meant for UAVs and for smaller applications like trainers and others. So that is also going on fine. So we expect that these two engines in the smaller categories, which we are developing, as well as the bigger engine that is 110 kilonewton through DRDO, which is slated to be developed to the engine complex that is being set up by DRDO, we should be there with a workable engine in about 7 to 10 years from now. But this whole project has been delayed quite a bit because we should have got into the engine development from the beginning, though not many countries are successful in doing it. So we should have done it a bit earlier. Of course, whatever it is, as of now, also it is not too late to start with the engine project, and we hope that this 110 kilonewton engine project fructifies and we have an engine of Indian origin which can be used in our aircrafts.
Thank you, Mr. Madhav. You have given a lot of information, frankly, freely. I'm sure it is going to help a lot for several industries which are looking to get into the defense production business. It has been nice having you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. My apologies to Mr. Kautuk Shukla and Mr. Eric Gethard.
No problem. It was interesting.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Shukla. In the days to come, which is going to be your thrust area? Space projects, power plant projects, other component manufacture, or are you looking to upgrade yourself into an weapons platform integrator from a component manufacturer?
So I think that's a pretty complex question and probably will require a detailed answer.
Try to simplify.
I think so. The things that you mentioned, the different lines. You see, for us or for anybody to be successful in executing a particular project, you must have all the capabilities, all the knowledge, all the capacity, all the skills, all the approvals. Correct, and therefore you must have it all. Those are the table stakes. Once you have it all, you can produce one engine, or you can produce 4, 5, 6, 7. So today when we say that we are in the various LOBs that you just narrated, we have developed autonomous, let's say, infrastructure, which means we have processes, approvals, capacity, people, skills, everything for each one of these. And therefore, it's not a question of this or that. We are now looking at, and aerospace manufacturing has been fledgling. I mean, I would say, though we have been at it for last 20 years, we still would say that as a country, this is a fledgling industry, and therefore we expect exponential growth. And that's the reason why we will keep our eyes open and we'll remain focused on all the sectors that you mentioned, and each one of them has an opportunity. So whether it's space program or component manufacturing or even system, what Mr. Madhavan alluded to, supplying LRU, line replaceable units. And we are already doing it, and we must do it more. And the beauty of it is once you have established your credentials, so you have approval, you have long-term contracts with different customers and all that. Scaling up is easier than establishing. So I think so. We have firmly established ourselves in the various LOBs, and now we are sort of looking to scale up. And you can expect pretty good growth opportunities delivered. I mean, growth delivered by Godrej on all these.
Thank you. Mr. Kedar, your USP, according to your website, is the digitization of your supply chains, complete digitalization. And may I point out that therein lurks a danger, in the sense that in the last few weeks and months, you must have noticed that hackers like SolarWind, etc., have been busy practically everything in the world, whether it is defense, whether it is electricity, oil pipelines, information technology, you can name it. And hackers are at it. How do you protect your digitization of supply chains from such hackers? I am posing this question because preventing hacking is even more important for the defense sector than, shall we say, for the civilian sector.
Thank you. So I followed the previous discussions with very much interest, and when you talk about space and power plants, etc., in the logistics sector, the two key elements for the future are sustainability and digitization. So sustainability, we need to prepare for the electrical aircraft era, which has specifics in logistics with lithium batteries, etc., and make it sustainable, a carbon footprint offset. And the other one is digital. But I would not mention digital in the defense area. I would mention compliance in the broadest sense in the of the word, and that will include what you mentioned on information security. So first of all, on compliance, I think, especially in the defense sector, global compliance and global, it's not only ITAR, it's not only dual use, it's global compliance and micromanaging every part in the supply chain. So that has a lot of attention, and there are a lot of gaps still in the world. In Kunabe, we have a completely closed loop for that, which takes a lot of effort and people. And as you said, now in the world of information security and hijacking, I have to say, I think it's a daily, normal practice in the meantime that there are hijacks. We had 2 weeks ago a significant colleague provider being attacked as well, but there's daily attacks. So you need to be agile and flexible to adjust. I mean, we just put a third layer of encryption on top of everything we do, because in fact, we are an IT company. Our data makes us competitive, but also the data of our customers, of course, makes a difference in the customer's world. So that's an infrastructure which you need to protect for your own, but also for your customers. So first of all, it would be good to work with one single source of data and have multiple servers around the world to make sure that there's data continuity, but with one shield to avoid attacks. You need to organize it. Chief Information Security Officer is a new terminology, but will become common and needs to report as high in the organization as possible. And then, of course, with regard to defense information security, there's additional requirements which can be country specific that, okay, Mr. Provider, where do you have your servers around the world? If it's in that location, fine overall, but for my defense data, I don't want to have that data in that location, whatever you do. So on the defense segment, there's always an additional chapter of specific requirements which you need to tackle in close collaboration with your customers. And indeed, it's an art, it's a competence as such, which cannot be taken as, oh, just another attack, especially not in defense.
Thank you. Mr. Madhavan, it's nice to have you back. May I pose my next question to you? AMCA, that is the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft of the 5th generation, is being developed. ADA has designed it, I know that. But ultimately, I'm sure the responsibility for the prototype and the series production is going to come to you. Can you give us a very broad outline of how you plan to implement it, giving various steps at various intervals? Thank you.
The AMCA is still under design. So it is just now started with the design activities. So we expect the product to be somewhere in the late 20s that it will be introduced. And we are also looking at a way of partnering with the private sector in the sense it will not come directly to HL, but HL will be part of a vehicle that is a joint venture between a private company, HL, and DRDO, all put together. The expectation is that if there are two ways of looking at it, because the facilities that has to be set up for AMCA should be the same that is to be used for the prototype manufacture. So we are expecting that the first four or five prototypes that we manufacture also should be through the JV route. The problem with that, of course, is that AMCA comes in with a variety of different technologies, which is not as often existing with anybody, including HAL. So we are also going to create the facilities for that. Especially the structure itself is a different one. It has to be so that your radar signature is less. There is a lot of inbuilt systems that we are going to bring in, which is not only for the 5th generation, but many of them are in the 6th generation category, with few sensors and all being put right at the time when we are producing the wings and the fuselages. So there is a lot of new technologies that is going to come in. So we expect that whoever is the partner, the JV as such, should be along with us when the design is going on. So a lot of design activities has already started. We have entered with an MOU with DRDO, that is ADA, for what parts HL will design and what parts they will design. Of course, they are the project managers and the leads for the AMCA project, but a lot of detailed designs are done by HL. So that part is already in. So we expect that this JV also comes into picture quite fast now, so that the first prototype starts getting built now. So AMCA project is a long drawn process. So we want to involve the private sector now itself at the time of design. A lot of equipments also will be coming from Indian sources where they have developed their own systems. A lot of electronic items, which are, because that is the mainstay of it. And we want to involve them during the integration of the aircraft now itself, so that those equipments are also put in place when we are designing and type approving the aircraft.
Thank you. Mr. Shukla, a while ago, Mr. Madhavan mentioned the ongoing talks between HAL and the engine manufacturers, Safran and Rolls-Royce. You are a component supplier to both of these. So now, in effect, what might happen, is that the components will travel two sides of the triangle. You will supply to Safran and Rolls-Royce or Rolls-Royce, and they will in turn supply to HAL. Wouldn't you like a direct supply between you and HAL? And even Mr. Madhavan can participate in answering this question.
I can just start it off a little bit before Mr. Shukla gets in.
Okay.
We both have partnered for quite some time in different sectors, including for LCA also. Now what we are developing, the actuators which are coming from outside the country is now being developed along with ISRO and HAL and of course Godrej. So put together, we are trying to indigenize that item. So we have a long partnership going with Godrej. That is the first part of it. Second part of it is we are not having talks with Rolls-Royce or things. What I mentioned was Rolls-Royce and Safran, we are partners in joint ventures. So we have our own joint venture companies between Safran and HAL, as well as between Rolls-Royce and HAL. These are existing companies which are supplying parts. Mostly those parts are meant for civil engine use, not for the military. And the second part of the question, whether Godrej can supply directly those parts to us, probably not. because there is a contractual requirements within the, so they can't give me directly the parts, neither what parts we produce. We also produce a lot of engines. We have 2 locations where we produce engines. So that also is ownership rather goes through the OEM only. So we cannot directly supply like that. There are lots of engine parts of our own design, which of course will be made by a lot of companies, including Godrej, I'm sure about it. And we are also looking at partnering with other, especially because it involves a lot of chemistry. So especially those metallurgies where we have certain good suppliers and good, let us say, vendor base, we would like to take it from the Indian sources. One case at point, of course, is when we are trying to do the gearbox and things which are required for the engines. We are looking at Bharat Forge is one of those areas where they have a very good competency in developing such things. So we look at all possible partnerships with all possible vendors, or including, of course, PSUs also, where we can get things from. So we have partnership with not only this one, where a lot of PSUs who are also operating, like BHL provides us certain parts for the LCA. There are Bell provides us the electronics, and this one. There are Data Pattern, which is providing lots of display systems. Samtel. There are so many of them who are now coming into the Tier 1 suppliers list. So we hope that this continues and we don't have to look far for making sure that our accessorizing of the aircraft, we don't have to import items from outside.
Mr. Shukla, would you like to add anything?
Yeah. I think, thank you, Mr. Vadhavan. I think you brought a great deal of clarity, and, of course, I would have said the same thing, but coming from you, there is a sense of authority to this. I would just add to what Mr. Madhavan mentioned, and this I say for Godrej, because we are already doing, but I'm sure there are other manufacturers in this vendor ecosystem also. A while back, I mentioned to you that, in Godrej, we have a pretty well integrated infrastructure, in the sense we have machining, fabrication, assembly, and a whole lot of surface treatment capabilities. And we have, as I mentioned, we have NADCAP approvals for them and individual customer approvals. You will be happy to know that even with our competitors, if they do not have certain NADCAP approvals, we do the work for them, because finally, I think the industry, so while we compete with each other, we also collaborate, and we are happy to, help another vendor to meet end customer requirements. Though, ideally we would have liked to do the machining as well as the surface treatment of machining, fabrication, and the surface treatment, everything. But, we are not sore losers. I mean, if you don't get that part of work, we will do, because I think it's important that, that industry, if the industry becomes, vibrant and grows, we are sure that eventually that, next time when we are dealing with that vendor, also we will have a very fruitful association. So I'll just add to, to what he said, that there is a bit of competition amongst vendors, but there is a whole lot of collaboration also, which is not, normally spoken about. And I thought I'll use this forum to highlight, the kind of collaborative effort the vendors have with each other to serve the end customer.
Thank you. That's welcome news. Mr. Gedak, correct me if I'm wrong in calling out the name of the protocol, but your aerospace supply chain would naturally take its provisions from Cargo 2000. Am I right? Cargo 2000 protocol. Okay.
Yes.
In India, very few airports are really equipped to handle things according to Cargo 2000 protocol.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to go directly to the smaller Tier 2 or Tier 3 airports, which are not yet equipped themselves for that protocol, would you see that as an obstacle?
Well, it's not an enabler. It's not helping, at least. But I mean, that's not only on the smaller airports in India, it's happening everywhere. So that's why we have usually local staff as well, our own staff, to support out where there are gaps. And furthermore, not only Cargo 2000 or Cargo IQ as it's called now, but also with regard to airside logistics, we have a project ongoing where we certify airports and ground handlers ourselves to deal with the specific requirements, especially for high sensitive goods. So you need to create contingencies and for that on your own. That's part of our company's DNA, if I may say so. And also in India, I think we have more than 40 locations where we support and work on. But of course, with the number of increasing airports, I think for new airports, developed, it will be part of the standard infrastructure of the future.
Thank you. That should calm things down a lot among those who worry about such things. Mr. Shukla, this is the last question for you. In the last budget, a fund was created which was non-lapsable for capital expenditure on defense procurement. Now, would you consider, as a part of corporate social responsibility, to contribute to this fund and to get whatever the applicable tax concessions are for such contributions under CSR?
Yeah, so I think our CSR effort at Godrej, we are now in our 124th year, and our CSR efforts have been, I mean, just to give you an idea that, very, very large proportion of the surplus that we make goes towards protecting environment, for water conservation, and all projects that we do for society. So we have been doing it now for over 100 years before CSR became fashionable, and therefore there are a whole lot of commitments that was done. So I mean, I will not be able to answer that specific question, but I think in terms of CSR, we are doing a great deal of work for skilling. And skilling for the sectors that we are in also is very, very varied. We have appliance business, and we have office furniture, locks, and then we have businesses like aerospace and defense. And each one of them, in terms of the numbers required, the amount of skill required, the time it takes to develop those skills is different. And we remain focused on each one of them. So our CSR is primarily towards environmental. I think sustainability was a thing that mentioned. You'll be happy to know that Godrej is a carbon neutral company, is a water positive company, and many of our businesses are Green Co certified. So we have taken sustainability and very, very seriously, and a whole lot of CSR funds are diverted towards that. We also take societal benefits, particularly for skilling and employment generation, or other skilling for employment, very seriously.
Mr. Shukla, I'm sorry for interruption, but my question was specific to contributions to this non-lapsable fund.
No, correct. So, I mean, we have not looked at, once again, so that's what I said. You mentioned CSR, can we use our CSR funds to do that? So, I think if we have surplus CSR funds, we will look at it probably amongst other avenues. But I think we are today doing much more than what the mandate would be required. So I mean, we haven't fallen short of ideas on how to do CSR.
I'm sure about that. Okay.
And no, with no offense to anybody, because sometimes if you don't have a very mature CSR program, then you would, then there would be an organizations which could actually use this facility. So it's a good facility, but fortunately, we have not had the need to look at it.
Thank you so much. Towards the end, I would say, I'm sure the viewers and the listeners have imbibed a lot of useful information from all the participants in this program. My grateful thanks to Mr. Madhavan, Mr. Shukla, and Mr. Gerard. I wish you all the best in your endeavors in the India's defense sector. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you for having us on the show. Jai Hind. Have a good day.